Hi, welcome to the RCMAR annual meeting. I'm Roch Nianogo. I'm an assistant professor at UCLA in the Department of Epidemiology and a RCMAR scholar. And I'm very excited to talk to you about my research title, Unpacking the Black Box in the Relationship Between Acculturation and Cognition. 1 in 6 people aged 70 years and older have dementia or cognitive impairment. It represents a significant health problem among the elderly because of its marked impact on daily activities and independent living and quality of life. Cognitive impairment and dementia represent a substantial burden to individuals, families, and societies. And these conditions represent one of the costliest diseases in the United States, costing about over $200 billion in total monetary costs in 2010. Hispanics in the United States generally have lower mortality rates than non-Hispanics whites in the United States, despite having low socioeconomic status. This has been termed the Hispanic Paradox. However, recent studies have also shown that Hispanics although they may have lower mortality rates, have higher disability rates and generally poor self-rated health than older non-Hispanic whites. In addition, about 25% of all US immigrants are from Mexico, and 60% of Hispanics in the United States are of Mexican descent. So we wanted to really understand the relationship between acculturation and dementia and cognitive impairment. And to do so, it's important for us to define what we mean by acculturation. Here is the process of adaptation and adoption of a new culture's attitudes, values, and behaviors by an individual or a group from a different culture. Hispanic immigrants with a low acculturation are those who are less assimilated to the Anglo culture. For example, we have first-generation immigrants. In the literature, it has been hypothesized in some studies that high acculturation is associated with increased risk of inflammation, and that in other studies it has also been posited that an increase in inflammation may be related to an increase in dementia risk. But again, this has not necessarily been replicated in older Hispanics, and this is one of the reasons why we wanted to look at it within this population. And these two different types of relationship may suggest that there may be an indirect effect of acculturation on dementia risk through its effect on inflammation. And so the objective of the study was to investigate how acculturation would affect cognitive impairment and dementia. And we posited that high acculturation would precipitate cognitive impairment in older adults through its effect on inflammation, depression, cigarette smoking, and alcohol consumption. We use the Sacramento area Latino study on aging, which is a prospective cohort study of Americans of Mexican descent who reside in California's Sacramento Valley, and it's about less than 2,000 Mexican Americans age 60 and older who were followed for about 10 years, with home visit occurring about every year. So to undertake this study, we operationalized our main exposure of interest, acculturation, using the revised acculturation rating scale for Mexican Americans. We calculated the average score of Anglo orientation scale, as well as the average score of Mexican orientation scale. For example, some of the questions that were asked for the Anglo orientation scale include speaking English, enjoy speaking English, and associated with Anglos. And participants were asked to rate these questions from 0 to 4, with 0 being not at all to 4 being always. And we calculated the acculturation score, and those who have a positive acculturation score or those who have a positive acculturation score are classified as having high acculturation, and those who have a negative acculturation score are considered to have a low acculturation. We explored various groups of mediators, one of them being inflammatory biomarkers, including C-reactive protein, interleukin-6, tumor necrosis factor alpha. And we looked at also other psychological factors such as smoking, any alcohol consumption, as well as depression. The outcome of interest was incident dementia and cognitively impaired but not demented. We hypothesized based on the current literature that acculturation may be related to dementia and cognitive impairment through its effect on inflammatory biomarkers as well as psychological factors. And we wanted to test this hypothesis in this study. So we used a method that is similar to structural equation modeling and other causal inference methods that are based on the potential outcomes framework to decompose basically the effect of acculturation on cognitive impairment through inflammatory biomarkers as well as psychological factors. In our study population, about the average age was about 70 years, and we had about 60% of the population that were female. What's also interesting is that among people who have a high acculturation score, 8% had incident dementia and cognitive impaired but not demented. And among those who have a low acculturation level, about 11% have incident dementia and cognitive impaired but not demented. But again, this is a bivariate unadjusted estimate. In our adjusted estimate, we found that people who have a high acculturation score, again, those who assimilate more with the Anglo culture, tend to have a better survival with respect to dementia and cognitive impairment compared to those who have low acculturation. What this means is that high acculturation seem to be protective of developing dementia or cognitive impairment. So we wanted to see if that relationship was mediated through various mediators, including interleukin-6, tumor increasing factors, alpha, and others that we'll go through in a minute. But here, as you could see, there is no relationship here in the indirect effect. And again, we're looking at the indirect effect. An indirect effect here would be one that would be completely above the null or completely below the null. In this case here, it's around the null, which means that interleukin-6 does not mediate the relationship between acculturation and incident dementia and cognitive impairment. This was also true for tumor necrosis factor alpha, and also true for C-reactive protein. So basically, the inflammatory biomarkers did not mediate the relationship between acculturation and incident dementia and cognitive impairment. But these relationships were also replicated and was also similar to those that were found using depression. Here again, as you can see, there was no relationship between, or depression rather did not mediate the relationship between acculturation and incident dementia and cognitive impairment. Same was true with alcohol consumption as well as smoking. And all of them did not appear in our study to mediate the relationship between acculturation and incident dementia and cognitive impairment. And so, as mentioned, none of these factors explored were found to be mediators in the relationship between acculturation and cognitive impairment and dementia. In conclusion, high acculturation was associated with lower risk of dementia and cognitive impairment. And so there appears to be a marginal protective effect of acculturation on cognitive impairment. And this suggests that the negative effects of acculturation documented in the literature could be perhaps reversed among older Latinos, at least in the study population that we've studied here. In addition, contrary to our initial hypothesis, inflammatory biomarkers such as inflammatory biomarkers as well as smoking, alcohol consumption, depression did not appear to mediate this relationship. It may be that there exist other mediators and mechanisms not explored through which here through which acculturation may affect dementia risk. So but it's important for us to continue the research to explore other mechanisms that could be identified as potential intervention targets. So I'll stop here and look forward to receiving your questions. And thank you again for your attention. You may direct all the questions also to my email address here. Thank you very much for your attention.